They say everyone has skeletons in their closet. We've grown used to hearing that as a metaphor, a small, shameful secret, a youthful mistake, a white lie to keep the peace. But what if your entire life was nothing more than a stage set, built on a foundation of a horrific secret? Sarah always thought her father, Thomas, was the most boring man in the state of Connecticut. He was a quiet, invisible clockmaker who hadn't missed a Sunday dinner in 30 years, but had also never once hugged his daughter. When he died, he didn't leave her a sentimental letter or a box of photos. He left her a set of old keys and a ledger containing 12 names. Next to each name was a date and a dollar amount. The total at the bottom of the list was staggering. Over $4 million. How does a simple repairman, a man whose lunch was always a tuna sandwich and an apple, come across that kind of money? And why did the people on this list tremble with either rage or fear at the mention of Thomas White's name? Today, I'm going to tell you the story of what was really hiding behind the ticking of the clocks in that empty workshop. This is a story about a love so massive, it became a life sentence. November in Ridgefield is a season of gray skies and clinging fog. I stood in the center of the living room of the house where I grew up, feeling like a stranger. My father's death hadn't brought tears. It brought a strange sense of closure, mixed with a lingering irritation. My father, Thomas White, was a man of routine. He was like the mechanisms he repaired, reliable, precise, and utterly cold. I don't remember him ever laughing. I don't remember him ever being angry. He just was. As soon as I turned 18, I left for New York, became a successful lawyer, and almost never looked back. Our rare phone calls were limited to the weather and the price of heating oil. I walked into his workshop. It smelled of machine oil, dry wood, and something else, the stale scent of decades of solitude. My eyes fell on his workbench. Underneath it, hidden behind a layer of dust and leather scraps, I saw an uneven floorboard. I pried it up with an old scalpel. Inside was a small steel sentry safe. The code, what kind of code would a man of habit use? I tried my mother's birthday, no. His own birthday, nothing. On a whim, I entered the date of my wedding. The day he had shown up for, sat silently in a corner for 3 hours, and then left without even saying congratulations. Click. The safe opened. There were no family jewels inside. Just a blue leather ledger and a stack of bank statements. I opened the first page. The entries began in December 1993. Mark Wahlberg, $5,000. Sheriff Miller, $2,000. Elizabeth Green, $10,000. Page after page. 30 years of continuous payments. The total was $4,215,000. I stared at the numbers, struggling to breathe. My father barely cleared $40,000 a year. Where did millions come from? And what was he paying these people for? The first name on the list led me to the backwoods of Maine. It was a 5-hour drive, the landscape shifting into dense forests and dilapidated trailer parks. Mark Wahlberg, no relation to the actor, was a heavy-set old man with a face like weathered oak and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He was sitting on a plastic chair outside a rusted trailer, sharpening a hunting knife. "Are you Mark?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Sarah White, Thomas White's daughter." Mark froze. The knife scraped a metal shaving off the blade. He looked up at me with a gaze heavy with resentment. "Come to tell me the gravy train has stopped," he rasped. "My father is dead," I replied. "I found the records of the payments." "What was he paying you for, Mark?" "Since 1993, you've received money from him every single month." Was this blackmail? Mark suddenly burst into a dry, hacking laugh. "Blackmail? No, girl. Your father was paying a silence tax. He bought our hush, and God is my witness, he paid the full price. I haven't slept through the night in 30 years because of that silence. Do you know what it's like? Knowing a killer is walking free while you're drinking away his checks." My heart skipped a beat. "A killer? What are you talking about?" "My father couldn't kill anyone. He wouldn't hurt a fly." Mark stood up, his knee popping loudly. "Drive to Old Lyme. Find Sheriff Miller. If he hasn't lost his mind yet, ask him about the Impala in 1993. And don't come back here. You smell like him. You smell like the lie he paid for." Old Lyme greeted me with the smell of salt and dampness. The retired sheriff, Harry Miller, lived in a house overlooking the bay. He was far more polite than Mark, but I saw the same shadow in his eyes. When I showed him the ledger, he let out a long sigh and gestured for me to sit on the porch. "I expected someone would come," he said, staring at the sea. "Thomas was a very punctual man." "Tell me the truth, Sheriff," I demanded. Mark said my father was a killer. What happened in November of '93? Miller closed his eyes, as if summoning frames from an old film. It was the coldest night of the year. Highway 84. A black Impala, registered to your father, crossed the center line. It practically sliced a family minivan in half. A father, a mother, and 2 kids. The boy was 5, the girl was 7. They died instantly. The driver of the Impala fled into the woods before the units arrived. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. "And you found him? My father?" "He walked into the station himself the next morning." Miller paused, choosing his words carefully. "But he didn't come to turn himself in. He put a briefcase of cash on my desk. There was $100,000 in there. Huge money for a town like ours back then." He said, "There will be no forensics. The witnesses didn't see anything. And I will pay the surviving relatives for the rest of my life. If you agree, my daughter will never know the truth." "And you took it?" I whispered, disgusted. "We had no direct evidence against him, Sarah. And that money, it helped the survivors. We closed the case as a hidden run, suspect unknown. Your father sold everything he had, went into massive debt, and he kept his word. He paid for 30 years. I left the sheriff's house in a total fog. So it was true. My boring, quiet father was a monster who bought his freedom. He didn't hug me because his hands were covered in the blood of those children. He didn't look me in the eye because he was afraid I'd see the reflection of that night. I hated him. Every minute of my life, paid for with that blood money, felt desecrated. There was one name left, Elizabeth Green. She was the only survivor from that minivan. She had lost everything in one night. I had to see her. I had to give her whatever was left of my father's estate and beg for forgiveness I knew couldn't be granted. Elizabeth lived in a suburb of Boston, a small white house with a neat garden. When I knocked, a woman with incredibly kind but infinitely tired eyes opened the door. "You're Sarah," she said. It wasn't a question. You look just like your mother. The same red hair. We went into the kitchen. I laid the ledger on the table. I know what my father did. I began, my voice breaking. I know about the accident. I know about the money.
I'm
so sorry, Elizabeth. I'm selling the house and everything he owned. I want you to take the money. It's nothing compared to what you lost, but I can't keep it. Elizabeth watched me in silence as she poured tea. Her hands were steady. Your father was a remarkable man, Sarah. The bravest man I ever knew. I snapped my head up, stunned. Brave?
He fled the scene.
He bribed the police. He was a coward who hid behind his clocks for 30 years. Elizabeth sat down across from me and took my hands in hers. Sarah, look at me. That night, behind the wheel of the Impala, it was your mother, Martha. The world stopped. The sound of cars outside, the ticking of the clock on the wall, everything vanished. She was drunk, Elizabeth continued, her voice devoid of malice, filled only with a quiet sorrow. She had postpartum depression. She wasn't coping. That night, she just got in the car and drove. She killed my family, Sarah. Your father found her in the woods an hour after the crash. She was completely lost in a haze of terror and guilt. I listened, and in my mind, the walls I had built my whole life began to crumble. Martha didn't die of cancer a year later, Elizabeth said softly. She took her own life a week after the accident. She couldn't live with it. Thomas found her in the bathroom, and in that moment he had a choice. Let the world know his wife was a killer and a suicide, leaving his 3-year-old daughter with a stigma of being a monster's child, or take the sin upon himself. Elizabeth squeezed my hands. He came to me the day after Martha's funeral. He cried in a way men shouldn't cry. He begged me to give you a chance at a normal life. He promised he would be a living shield between you and the truth. He said, let her think her mother was an angel. Let her think I'm just a boring old man. I will give you every cent I ever earn. Just don't tell her. I don't remember the drive back to Ridgefield. I walked into my father's workshop. It didn't look dusty or boring anymore. It looked like an altar. I stared at his workbench. I imagined him sitting here every night until 3 or 4 in the morning, repairing the tiniest mechanisms while his eyes burned with strain. He wasn't saving money. He wasn't spending it. He was converting every second of his life into an atonement for the sin of the woman he loved more than life itself. He deprived himself of the joy of being my father. He couldn't hug me because every time he looked at me, he saw Martha. He saw the accident. He felt the weight of 12 witnesses he owed. He chose the role of the cold and indifferent father so that I would never ask questions, so that I could grow up in a world where my mother was a saint. I found one more envelope in the safe, a very small one. Inside was a photo, me, a toddler, sitting on my father's shoulders. He's smiling. It's the only photo where I've ever seen him smile. The date on the back was the day before the accident. At the bottom of the envelope was a note, short like everything he did.
Sarah.
Time is the only resource that cannot be repaired. I spent my time so that you could have yours. Don't look for someone to blame. Just live. You are worth every second of this silence. I pressed the note to my face and wept. For the first time, the workshop felt truly quiet. The clocks kept ticking, but now I knew the price of every second of their silence. We often judge people for being closed off, never suspecting the battle they are fighting inside. The most valuable inheritance isn't millions in a safe. It's a clean name and the ability to sleep at night, never knowing the price someone else paid for your peace. Cherish the people in your life. Sometimes, their silence is the loudest form of love a human being is capable of. I hope this story stayed with you. If you found it moving, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories hidden behind closed doors. I'll see you in the next one.